Hi everyone, this is part two of uh, Introduction to Poetry. We left off talking about the sounds of language and sounds of foreign language and sounds of English, and now we're going to start with looking at an actual poem. Okay, here we go.
So here's a poem, probably the most famous poem, one of the most famous poems in English. Stopping by woods on a snowy evening. Whose woods these are? In fact, you know what? I want you to pause in 1 second. Pause this video. And instead of just listening to me read you this poem, I want you to read this poem out loud to yourself. Okay? So pause now. Okay. I think you can hear that it's a pretty soothing poem, that there are a lot of uh, beautiful sounds. You hear that you saw the two lines that I referred to earlier. The only other sounds, the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. Um, it's a very soothing image of the woods quietly filling up with snow on a dark evening. In fact, the darkest evening of the year. Um, there's a horse. There's a um, horse-drawn carriage. We guess. There's the harness bells shaking, and besides that, just the sound of the wind. The final stanza is the woods are lovely, dark, and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. It's a very regular rhythm. The repetition of the D sound, dark and deep, that's called alliteration. We'll be talking about that more later. Um, but the whole effect is a very calming one. Um, and we haven't even talked really about the meaning, which some people think this is a poem about death, that um, the speaker, which is in poetry is in a short story you call it the narrator, in a poem you call it the speaker. When there's an I in the poem, there's a speaker, so this one has a speaker. He's on his carriage being drawn by the horse, looking into the snowy forest and thinking how nice it might be perhaps to go in and do what? Who knows? Um, fall asleep? He says, there is the line, the easy wind and downy flake in the third stanza. What is down? Down is feather. So it kind of evokes like a down comforter. The woods are lovely, dark, and deep, but I have promises to keep. There's something drawing him into those woods. And maybe it's death, maybe it's something, I don't know. Um, but he rejects it in the final two lines. But I have three lines. But I have promises to keep. Miles to go. We don't know exactly what he wants to do in the woods. Some people think that it's his attraction to death, but his insistence finally is to keep on going. We'll talk more about the meanings of poems. I'm still kind of talking about very basic level, the sounds, but now transitioning into the way that words react with each other in a kind of chemical way. What I mean is this. So take this word butterfly. It's just a one word in the English language. It's a strange word because it's an insect and it has the word butter in it, which is weird, but whatever, it's just a word. But now if we join that word with another word like this, livid butterfly. So livid means incredibly angry, right? Now you have an interesting image in your head, don't you? Livid butterfly. A butterfly is generally something we think is a kind of peaceful animal that floats along from flower to flower. But now we have this image of an angry butterfly. It's a butterfly with black wings with like a skull and crossbones on each wing or something, like a really pissed off butterfly. It's unusual, but it's interesting. It's more interesting than butterfly, right? So here these two words have kind of reacted with each other. Let's do another one. Makeup. Wasted makeup. Okay? Wasted makeup. It's an odd one. Think about that. You might think, well, she put on makeup, or he put on makeup, and then spent the evening crying because they got stood up on their date, and they wasted all the time they put on their makeup. Plus, their tears washed it down their face. They got to take it off. One possible interpretation of wasted makeup. How about someone who's so beautiful that she if she put makeup on, it'd be wasted, right? Doesn't need makeup. Um, or someone who, in contrast, is very unattractive, and even with the makeup they put on, it's still wasted. Doesn't help, right? So, we've come up with a few different ways already to think of an interpretation of wasted makeup, and it's just two words. It's like a tiny, tiny little poem. So I asked students to write their own in class recently, and they came up with these. Professional baby. Periwinkle dirt. It doesn't have to mean anything, but if it creates an interesting image or a feeling or something, then it's doing its job, right? Dirty sanctuary. Coconut bazooka. Am sorry. Dance hall milkshake. Normal castration. I saw that once on a clipboard when I took my cat to the vet. It didn't seem like two words that should ever go together. This next one, I think, is one that one of my students wrote when I asked them to write their own two-word poems. Lame assignment. Okay, so moving on. You recognize this, I'm sure. Captchas. These are things that pop up. They're a security check, right? So some of these are interesting. There's a great TED talk by the guy who developed these. Flushing economy. They're two randomly selected words out of English. It's basically so they know that you're not a robot, right? We're shysters. Infinite beer. Kind of like that one.
Okay, that's the end of part 2, everybody. Keep your eyes open for part 3 on its way.